He thought he was meeting a stranger for dinner, but when he sat at the wrong table, he met the woman who would change his life forever. Ethan Carter walked in, the warm light falling across his sun-tanned face and the rough calluses on his hands, the unmistakable marks of a man who worked with his hands, not someone who belonged in a place this fancy. He wore a simple denim shirt, clean jeans, and boots still dusted from the road. In a room filled with perfume, clinking glasses, and perfectly tailored suits, Ethan felt like a man who had wandered into the wrong world. But tonight, he wasn't here for himself. His sister Madison had begged him all week. "Just one night, Ethan. She's amazing, smart, kind, and someone worth stepping out of your comfort zone for." He smiled at the memory. Madison always believed in things like the right person at the right time. Ethan, on the other hand, believed in engines, in the honest hum of machinery more than in people's words. On his phone, a message blinked. "Table by the window, blue dress." Ethan took a deep breath and scanned the softly lit room. Then he saw her, sitting quietly by the large window where the streetlight outside formed a gentle halo around her softly curled blonde hair. The navy blue dress traced her graceful figure, light gliding over her smooth, pale skin, before resting on the delicate hands folded neatly on the table. She was radiant. Not the kind of radiant born of glamour or style, but of stillness, purity. A calm so genuine it seemed to slow the world around her. But when his gaze fell lower, Ethan's heart faltered. Beside her was a wheelchair. He froze. Madison had never mentioned that. Part of him hesitated. Another part felt ashamed for even reacting that way. But she was there, at the correct table, in the blue dress, waiting for someone. He swallowed hard, straightened his collar, and walked over. "Hi, I'm Ethan. Are you waiting for someone?" She looked up, and in that instant, every light in the room seemed to fade, leaving only her clear blue eyes and the gentle smile that met him. "I'm waiting for my father," she said softly, her voice light as a breeze. "And you?" Ethan flushed, fumbling for words. I'm looking for someone for a blind date. My sister said blue dress window seat, so I thought you might be." She laughed. It wasn't mocking or distant. It was warm, genuine, the kind of laugh that made Ethan smile despite himself. "I'm afraid I'm not her," she said, still smiling. "But my father is always late. You can sit for a while if you like. Maybe this little mistake will make both our evenings more interesting." Ethan glanced around, then back at her, and before he knew it, he nodded. In that moment, the table no longer felt like a mistake, but like the beginning of something real. He pulled out a chair and sat down. The girl in the blue dress extended her hand, her smile never fading. "I'm Lily Anderson." "Ethan Carter," he replied, shaking her hand gently. "And it seems fate just seated me at the wrong table tonight." Lily smiled. "Sometimes the best things in life begin with a little mistake. Don't you think so?" Ethan chuckled softly, but in his eyes something had already changed. A dinner that began at the wrong table might just have placed him exactly where destiny wanted him to be. Ethan sat across from Lily, the initial awkwardness slowly melting away, replaced by a warm curiosity. He didn't quite know why, but there was something about her that made him want to stay. Not out of politeness, but because she made him feel at peace. Lily gently set her glass down, tilting her head with a teasing smile. "So, does the woman you were supposed to meet tonight know you sat at the wrong table?" Ethan chuckled, scratching his head. "I guess not. She's probably somewhere looking around and wondering why her date never showed up." And meanwhile, "You're sitting here, chatting with a strange girl in a blue dress," she said, her eyes glimmering with playfulness. He nodded, half joking, half serious. "I'm not sure I need to go find anyone else anymore." Lily smiled softly, a mix of shyness and sincerity. She turned her gaze toward the window where the streetlights reflected gently off the wooden table, her voice slowing. "You know, I haven't been out for dinner in a place like this for almost a year." "Why not?" Ethan asked quietly. "After the accident, I lost all feeling from the waist down. My father still hasn't really gotten over it. He thinks I need to be watched over, protected, as if I've suddenly become fragile, breakable." Ethan was silent, not because he didn't know what to say, but because he could feel the weight in her voice. Not sadness exactly, but resignation. After a pause, he spoke softly, his tone steady but gentle. "He's wrong." She turned to him, brow slightly furrowed. "Wrong about what?" "About you. I've only known you for 10 minutes, but I can already tell. That wheelchair is the least interesting thing about you." The words hung in the air between them, plain, honest, unpolished, and somehow they changed everything. The candlelight seemed to glow brighter. Lily's face softened and her smile returned, quiet but deep. "You know," she said softly, "that's the first time anyone's ever said something like that to me. Not with pity, not trying to sound positive, just honestly." "I wasn't trying to say something nice," Ethan replied, smiling. "I was just saying what's true." They both laughed, and this time it wasn't the awkward laugh of two strangers on a first meeting, but something genuine, effortless. The conversation flowed naturally after that, as if they'd known each other for years. Lily told him about her work. She was a freelance programmer, designing educational software to help kids learn coding. When Ethan asked more, her eyes lit up, her voice animated. "I love programming. It's like solving an endless puzzle, and every perfect line of code makes me feel like I'm building something meaningful." Ethan listened, genuinely interested. He didn't pretend to understand every technical term, but he was drawn in by the way she talked about what she loved. "My father thinks it's just a hobby," she said with a faint, bittersweet smile, "because I work from home. To him, the only things that count are what happens in offices, meetings, ties, schedules. That's what's serious." "But you make a living doing it, right?" "More than enough," she said lightly. "But that doesn't change the way he sees me." Ethan shrugged slightly. Sometimes people can't recognize the value in things that don't fit their mold. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. She looked at him. His eyes were so sincere that for a few seconds she couldn't find any words. Then Lily spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you ever think that some people see us more clearly than our own family does?" Ethan smiled, his tone low and calm. "Yeah. Maybe because they don't see us through memory. They see us as we are, right now." She was silent for a moment, the corners of her lips curling faintly. "You have a habit of saying things that make people think too much." "I just say what I see," he replied. "And what I see is a strong, brilliant woman who deserves to live fully, not under anyone's pity, but in her own light." In that moment, the camera would close in on Lily's face, the candlelight reflecting in her eyes, shimmering not with tears, but with the feeling of being seen. truly seen. The background music softened. The gentle clinking of silverware echoed lightly. The restaurant was growing busier. Warm golden light reflected off every face. A man appeared, tall, in a black suit, his demeanor cold, yet commanding. Ethan was telling Lily about his small auto repair shop when a deep, authoritative voice spoke from behind. Lily. She looked up, her shoulders tensing slightly, the instinctive reaction of someone who had learned to brace herself against others' overprotection. Dad, she smiled softly. I knew you'd be late. The man approached, silver hair, sharp eyes, and a kind of love too heavy to ever be gentle. Charles Anderson, CEO of a major tech corporation in Austin, and a father who had never quite accepted that his daughter was no longer as she used to be. He leaned down to kiss Lily on the cheek, then turned toward Ethan, his eyes scanning him from head to toe in one quick, assessing glance. And this is Ethan Carter, Lily introduced calmly, her tone light but firm. He sat at the wrong table, and we happened to start talking. Charles smiled politely, though his smile was colder than a December wind. Oh, how interesting. And what do you do, Ethan? I own an auto repair shop down in South Austin. Carter Auto Repair. Charles raised an eyebrow, his voice level but edged with subtle condescension. A practical profession. The air between them thickened. Ethan held his polite smile, unfazed. He'd met men like this before, men who didn't need to insult you with words because a single glance was enough to say, "You don't belong here." Lily sensed it. She lifted her chin and looked at her father. Dad, he's really nice. I invited him to sit because you're always late. Charles nodded slightly, maintaining his superior composure. Well then, I suppose it's fortunate I arrived just in time. Our private table in the next room is ready. We should go. Ethan began to rise, ready to excuse himself politely, but Lily looked at him, her eyes both an invitation and a quiet defiance toward her father. Dad, she said slowly, if you don't mind, I'd like him to join us. After all, he was just about to leave because of my mistake. A brief silence hung in the air. Then Charles forced a thin smile. If that's what you want. They sat in the private dining room, the meal unfolded in an uneasy silence. From time to time, Charles asked a few questions, the kind that sounded polite but were, in truth, tests, or worse, measurements, ways to weigh the worth of the man before him. Did you go to college, Ethan? No, sir. I started as an apprentice when I was 18. I worked my way up and opened my own shop after 6 years. Charles sipped his wine and nodded. Impressive. They say success doesn't only come from knowledge, but from effort, though effort, too, has its limits. Ethan smiled faintly. He didn't respond, just glanced toward Lily, as if to say, It's okay. I'm used to this. She looked back at him, a silent apology in her eyes. A moment later, Charles took a phone call and stepped out. Lily leaned forward slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry. My father doesn't mean any harm. He just wants to protect you. Ethan finished softly but firmly. Yes, but sometimes being protected too much feels like being locked away. Ethan met her gaze, his tone low and steady. He loves you. That much is clear. But he's wrong about one thing. Wrong about what? He thinks you need someone to take care of you. But really, you just need someone who respects you enough to walk beside you." For a moment, Lily said nothing. No one had ever said that to her, at least not in a voice so calm, so free of pity, so purely sincere. Her voice trembled slightly as she spoke. "You know, that's what I've always wanted him to understand. But no one's ever put it into words like that." "Maybe," Ethan said. "He just needs to see it for himself." Charles returned to the table. No one spoke again. But in that silence, something invisible had formed. A connection between the man who had always been underestimated and the woman who had always been overprotected. Ethan didn't know what the future would hold. He only knew that tonight he would never forget her eyes. Eyes filled with both trust and quiet challenge, as if saying, "If you were brave enough to sit at the wrong table, be brave enough to stay." After that night, what seemed like a small mistake left an unforgettable mark on both of them. Ethan didn't know why, but for days afterward he kept thinking about Lily's smile. Gentle, confident, yet holding the quiet strength of someone who had learned to stand tall, even when she could no longer walk. He texted her simply, "I've never had a mistake feel this right before." She replied a few minutes later, "Maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe it was just destiny having a little fun with us." From that message, they began to talk more. A few coffee meetups, a few quiet walks along the riverbanks of Austin. Evenings spent watching movies in her small apartment. Nothing romantic in the traditional sense. No roses, no candles, no grand promises. Just two people slowly learning to trust. One small step at a time. Ethan was always on time. He didn't talk much, but every time something broke in Lily's apartment, he showed up quietly to fix it. And she, every time he spoke about his work, listened with a focus that made him feel more valued than he'd ever felt before. One spring afternoon, they sat beside Town Lake, the sunset spreading gold across the rippling water. Lily asked softly, her tone honest but uncertain, "Do you ever get tired of having to pay attention to everything when you're with me?" Ethan smiled faintly, eyes still on the glittering water. "I don't have to do anything, Lily. I just do what I want." "And what do you want?" "To be next to you." Lily turned toward him, sunlight catching her hair, lighting up her face. "You know," she said, "people always tell me I'm lucky to be alive after the accident. But few ever ask me what it's like to live after it. But you, I just see a strong woman," Ethan interrupted gently, his voice sincere. "Not because you survived an accident, but because you didn't let it define who you are." She smiled, whispering, "You have a way of saying out loud what others are afraid to think. And that's scarier than I expected." "If the truth scares people," Ethan said, "then maybe we're both just learning how to be brave." For a moment they sat in silence. The breeze carried the scent of grass and the distant hum of the city. No more words were needed. The stillness itself spoke louder, saying that they were touching each other not through gestures, but through trust. But not everyone believed in that. Charles Anderson, the father who had seemed so cold that evening, still carried a quiet fear. He didn't hate Ethan. He was simply afraid. Afraid his daughter would get hurt. Afraid that the love of a mechanic wouldn't be strong enough to withstand the complexity of her world. Afraid that one day Ethan would walk away, as so many others once had. One evening, Charles went to Ethan's garage. He stood amid the scent of oil and metal under the stark white glow of a half-flickering neon light. "Do you really believe you can give my daughter what she needs?" Ethan wiped his hands on a rag, his voice calm. "I don't know what your daughter needs, sir, but I do know I'll never see her as a burden." Charles looked at him for a long time, saying nothing. Then he turned to leave. But before stepping out, he paused and spoke quietly. "I've spent years protecting her from this world. Don't make me protect her from you." Ethan didn't reply. He understood. And he also knew trust couldn't be asked for. It could only be earned over time. In the months that followed, Ethan and Lily stayed together, quietly, without drama. He built a ramp at his garage so she could visit. She learned to stop apologizing every time he helped her. They both learned how to love without turning love into obligation. Ethan once said, "You don't need me to help you get somewhere. I just want to walk there with you." To Lily, those words were simple, but deeper than any promise could ever be. She once thought love was a luxury, something meant only for the whole and the complete. Until he came along and proved that sometimes completeness isn't about bodies. It's about the way two people see each other. That night, Austin was swallowed by the most significant storm it had seen in years. Rain poured down in sheets, wind howled through the streets, and thunder tore across the sky like a beast unleashed. In the industrial district south of the city, the water began to rise, creeping over concrete floors, seeping into a small auto shop with a fading sign that read, "Carter Auto Repair." Ethan rushed inside, his boots splashing through ankle-deep water, the flickering neon light above him sputtering weakly. He ran from one end of the shop to the other, hauling toolboxes onto shelves, the sharp clang of metal echoing through the pounding rain. Everything he had built over 6 years, sleepless nights, sweat, sacrifice, was now being swallowed by muddy water. His phone buzzed. The text appeared. "Heard the shop's flooding. I'm coming." He called back immediately. "Lily, don't. The storm's bad. Stay where you are." But all he could hear was the rain, and her breath, steady but firm, before she said, "I'm not coming to watch. I'm coming to help." Half an hour later, Lily arrived. Her thin raincoat clung to her, hair drenched, the wheels of her chair crunching through the water. She rolled in without hesitation. Her eyes were calm, but inside them, there was fire, the kind of fire that only burns in someone who refuses to stand still while the person they love is falling apart. "Ethan, where's the hard drive?" "In the office, but no buts. Bring it here. I need the customer database." She opened her laptop, booted it up, her fingers flying across the keys amid the pounding of the rain. She set up a temporary management board, calling a few friends in tech for emergency access to cloud storage. Outside, Ethan and 2 mechanics kept lifting cars above the rising water, but his eyes kept darting back toward her. She sat there, in the middle of the flooded, oil-slicked shop, working non-stop. Her blonde hair hung wet against her cheeks, raindrops glistened on her skin, but her face shone with focus and fierce determination. "Lily," Ethan shouted, "you need to rest. The water's freezing." "No, Ethan. I lost everything once already. I won't let you lose what you love." That stopped him cold. Not because of the words, but because of the conviction in her voice. She hadn't come to be saved. She had come to save him. An hour later, the water began to recede. The lights flickered, then came back on. A luxury car pulled up outside. Charles stepped in, raincoat over his shoulder, face a mix of worry and disbelief. He could hardly believe his eyes. His daughter, the same woman he had treated as fragile for 3 long years, was sitting in the middle of the chaos, commanding the scene like a field general. "Lily?" he called, his voice hoarse. She looked up, smiled faintly, her hands still moving. "I'll talk to you later, Dad. Right now, I have to restore Ethan's system." Charles stood frozen. He watched her, the way she gave orders, the way people listened, the way she maneuvered herself through the mess with strong hands and a sharp mind. He had never seen his daughter like this, or rather, he had never allowed himself to see her this way. Ethan walked up beside him, his voice low and rough from exhaustion. "She's incredible, isn't she?" Charles said nothing. Ethan continued, eyes still on Lily. "I know you think I'm not good enough for her. Maybe you're right. But I love her. Not because I want to protect her, but because she makes me want to be better. And I promise I'll spend my whole life proving that." Charles didn't respond. He just watched his daughter a moment longer, then exhaled as if releasing years of fear. "I've treated her like she was broken, ever since the accident." "She was never broken," Ethan said softly. "She just took a different road." A long silence followed. Then Charles nodded, slowly. His eyes on Ethan changed. No longer skeptical, but accepting, quietly, genuinely. That night, as the storm cleared and the floodwaters drained away, Lily sat by the shop's open doorway, watching the street lights shimmer across the wet pavement. Ethan draped a dry jacket over her shoulders and sat down beside her. "You know," she said softly, "for years I've tried to prove to my father that I'm not weak. But maybe I don't need to prove anything anymore." Ethan looked at her, his voice warm. "You were never weak, Lily. You just needed someone to see it. And I see it." She turned to him, smiling, a smile gentle yet radiant like sunlight after a storm. A year had passed since that stormy night. Austin once again glowed beneath the summer sun, the sky clear and endless, tree shadows stretching long across the small street where a new sign now hung. Carter and Anderson Auto, family-owned since 2019. The wooden door swung open. No longer the flooded workshop it once was, but a bright, warm, spotless space. Ceiling lights reflecting off smooth concrete floors. In the middle of the shop, hundreds of candles flickered, small, glowing, their flames dancing softly amid the faint scent of motor oil and wildflowers scattered around the room. Lily rolled inside and stopped at the center, her eyes widening at the sight before her. On the familiar workbench sat a small vase of flowers. Beside it, the old wooden board where Ethan used to scribble notes. But today it bore only one line, written in white chalk. "Sometimes the wrong table is just destiny's way of leading us to the right person." Ethan stepped out from behind a car holding a small box. His gaze met hers, not the look of admiration, but of a man who had found something worth keeping for a lifetime. "What are you doing?" Lily asked, her voice trembling slightly, half teasing, half breathless. "I'm just fixing something," he said softly. "Something fate happened to misplace." He walked closer, then knelt, not to prove anything but simply to meet her at eye level. The candlelight shimmered, reflecting in both their eyes. "Lily Anderson," he said slowly, voice deep and steady. "You've taught me that the most beautiful things in life don't come from perfect plans. They come from the stakes that somehow mean everything." "I sat at the wrong table, but I found the right person." She smiled through tears. "You don't love me despite the wheelchair," she whispered. "You love me because I'm me, my heart, my wheels, every part of who I am. Will you marry me? Without hesitation, Lily nodded. Her tearful smile glowed brighter than all the candles in the room. Yes, I will. Ethan laughed through his own tears. He slid the ring onto her finger, a simple silver band, gleaming with the same quiet strength as their faith in each other. In that moment, everything that had once gone wrong, every mistake, every doubt, every detour, suddenly made sense. The wedding took place 6 months later in the small garden behind their home. Friends, co-workers, neighbors, and even longtime customers of the shop came to celebrate. Charles Anderson, the father who had once tried to protect his daughter out of fear, walked her down the aisle between rows of white flowers. His steps were slow, but filled with pride. Sunlight brushed across Lily's hair. The breeze tugged gently at her pale blue dress, the same color she'd worn on that fateful night. During his speech, Charles raised his glass, his voice deep and trembling with emotion. I used to look at my daughter and only see what she'd lost. But today, I see only who she is, strong, brilliant, and loved, not out of pity, but because someone truly sees her. He turned to Ethan, his voice breaking. Thank you for helping me see her again. Thank you for loving her in the way I never knew how. Applause filled the garden, blending with soft music. Ethan took Lily's hand, leaned in, and whispered, I told you. Wrong table, right person. She laughed, that same radiant, tearful smile. You don't love me despite the wheelchair. You love me because I'm me. My heart, my wheels, everything that makes me who I am. Sometimes, the best things in life don't happen when we plan them, but when we stumble and realize the place we never meant to go is exactly where we belong. Because true love doesn't see limits. It doesn't ask why. It asks for whom. And when you find the person who makes you want to be better, then, even if the table was wrong, the heart is always right. If this story touched your heart, share it. Perhaps someone needs to be reminded that mistakes aren't the end. They're often the beginning of what's right. Thank you for watching Deep Life Tales, where small stories remind us that sometimes, just by seeing things differently, we can change the whole world. Like, share, comment, and subscribe to never miss the stories that make your heart believe in something good again.